Hey guys, congratulations. We have made it to the last chapter. Yay! And this is one of the shortest lectures. Okay. Um, Interestingly, some professors actually cut this chapter out altogether when they do lectures. Some lump it in with some of the beginning chapters. So we are going to do it, and it will be on your exam, but we will do it a short version here. Okay, ethical standards. Obviously, ethical standards are really important. I used to teach an ethics class in a marriage and family therapy master's program, and I would always say at the beginning, if you learn nothing else from this class, don't sleep with your clients, right? Like that's kind of the number one rule. Now, the things that we're going to learn today about abnormal psych are some different ethical issues, right? But that's generally, as a therapist, like that's a big no-no. It should be an easy one to remember, but yet somehow therapists every once in a while seem to screw that one up. I don't know what's wrong with those people. Anyway, moving on. Okay? Ethical standards. Psychologists are guided by both in their clinical and their research work by professional guidelines. These guidelines are established by the APA, or the American Psychological Association, as you should be familiar with at this point. So the American Psychological Association comes up with these strict codes, ethical standards for psychologists and other mental health professionals. You have to follow them to obtain your license. You have to learn them to obtain your license. And you have to follow them to keep your license, right? You don't want to lose your license. And you also want to be an ethical therapist or an ethical researcher because you just should. Okay? Now, all states in the United States have a board of psychologists that carry out the legal requirements for obtaining and retaining a psychology license. So here in Alabama, the Alabama Board of Psychology resides in Montgomery, and they have us, we do the national exam that all psychologists take, and then they have a state exam. The state exam here is just a written exam. In some states, you have a written and an oral exam. In other states, you have to have a requirement of basically a year's worth of clinical hours after all of your training that's required for your degree. You then have to have a year's worth of what we call postdoctoral hours. Here in Alabama, that's not required. So for me specifically, I was in California when I was first getting my license, and so I did all these hours that you're basically paid nothing for. And then I moved here, and they did not care about my hours. I mean, I'm glad I did them. I think I learned a lot. I think I grew a lot. I had a lot of good experiences. I really enjoyed having my supervisor that I had, but it's always interesting with different requirements. So these requirements typically include passing an exam, obtaining a certain number of supervised hours of training. Now, I should be clear. While Alabama does not require postdoc hours, it does require a year's worth of what we call internship hours after you've done all your classwork. So you do all your classwork for at least 4 years, and you see clients during that time, and that's supervised. And then you do 1 year long of full clinical internship. And that's what's required for Alabama. It's an extra year after that that's required for a lot of other states. All right. Most people have to receive recommendations from other licensed psychologists. Basically, somebody has to vouch for you that you're not terrible. And then we have to do continuing education hours. So every year in Alabama, I think we have to do 20 hours of continuing education. So we keep up on things, which is really important. You don't want somebody who is 70 years old who, got their degree when they were 30, who hasn't learned anything new since then. Okay, so ethical standards. In order to resolve ethical issues, we often call a colleague and say, here's what I'm thinking, here's this issue. Okay, we can look at the APA guidelines. What do they say? What do we say with that? We look at competence, meaning how do you get your license? Do you have all the requirements for that? Human relations, how are we interacting with others? All of that regulatory stuff is in the ethical standards. That is, how do we interact with clients and people in the community and parents of clients. We talk about privacy and confidentiality rules. We talk about advertising and other public statements and what you're allowed to say and how you're allowed to do it and how you're not. One of the things that's not on here also in ethical standards is payment and how you're able to use payment and how you're not allowed to barter with people unless it's like corn. You can like barter. I always think it's funny. You can barter for corn or hay because these are things that have an absolute value, but you can't barter for things like tax services or medical services because those things don't have an absolute value. And let's say you're your tax person's therapist and you don't love the way they've done it, and so therefore you then are not the best therapist to them, and that becomes a problem. Anyway. Okay. Let's see here. Okay. Oh, yeah. Here it is. Record keeping and fees. You have to keep your records for like a certain number of years depending on what state you're in. Education and training, research and publication, assessment, therapy. Those things are generally explainable. Okay. Informed consent. Okay, so this is a term you want to know. Informed consent. I have an informed consent form that I give to all my clients. You need informed consent when you're doing research, when you're seeing clients, when you're doing assessments, all of these things. Basically, this is this. A clinical psychologist is expected to provide their clients with knowledge ahead of time about what to expect or occur in treatment. Okay? Clinicians should provide clients with a written statement, so outlines the goals of treatment and the process of therapy, the client's rights and the therapist's responsibilities, the treatment risks and treatment techniques that are used, what the client will pay, what the limits of confidentiality are. Mine goes through, what happens when I go on vacation, what happens when they go on vacation, rules around emails and text messages, fees, no-show issues, a lot of those types of things. Okay, with confidentiality, we have this word, privileged communication. So privilege and confidentiality are two different words. Well, right, obviously they're two different words, but they are two different ideas, okay? So confidentiality is the term that we use as clinicians. Privilege is a term that is a legal term, okay? Privilege means that the clinician may not disclose any information about the client in a court of law without the client's expressed permission. We always say the client owns the privilege, meaning unless the client says, I want you to say this about me in the courtroom, you say nothing. My notes that I keep are very short and specific. They have everything that is needed and nothing more. If I am ever called into a courtroom, I will say minimally nothing. I can often say, I could say, I don't remember. There's that. I keep most things in my head anyway, write very few things down. So anyway, that's the idea. Now, sometimes clients want you to talk, and then it's important for you to do sort of an informed consent on that. Here's how this may help you. Here's how this may hurt you. Do you really want me to talk about this? Okay, exceptions to confidentiality. Everything stays confidential unless you tell me you're going to hurt yourself, you tell me you're going to leave and hurt someone else, or you tell me that a child is being harmed. In one of those three cases, I will tattle on you. I will call the appropriate people. I want people to be safe. I want you to be safe. I want children to be safe. And people usually understand that. Okay? Mandated reporting. This is, again, if we hear about a child being harmed, we are mandated to call DHR or whatever service it is in that state to let them know that somebody is being harmed or has been harmed. Now, duty to warn is also often referred to as the Tarasoff rule. Tarasoff was a case, you can look it up if you want to learn more about it, where basically the idea is what we have now is what we call this duty to warn. That is, if you are in my office and you say, I'm going to leave here and go murder my wife who lives at blah, 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 this place and whatever, I will call her and I will tell her that you are coming and you're going to hurt her. And I will also call and tell the police that you are coming and you are going to hurt someone. Okay? So that is Tarasoff's duty to warn. When we have relationships, we are not allowed to have what we call multiple relationships. So if somebody is my client, they cannot also be my babysitter. If somebody is my client, they cannot also be my boyfriend. If somebody is my client, they cannot also be my secretary. If somebody is my friend, I don't take them on as a client. That kind of thing. Okay. Boundaries. We want to avoid harm to others. We want to refrain from conflicts of interest. We want to refrain from exploiting other people who they may have a professional relationship with. I mean, the thing about ethical issues is they should be no-brainers, right? You should know not to be a jerk. You should know not to harm people. You should know not to be manipulative. You should know those things. However, we write them down and we call them, ethical issues and statements just so there's no confusion. All right, so ethical and legal issues providing services. So commitment is a word that is a legal term, and a commitment is an emergency involuntary psychiatric hospitalization. You may hear it called a 5150. That's basically the police code for this person is a danger to themselves or a danger to others. So a 5150 is a danger to self or danger to others, and we do an involuntary psychiatric hold, sometimes of 48 hours. People have the right, though, to refuse treatment. Even if they are held in a psychiatric hospital, they have the right to say, I'm not taking medication, and I'm not going to therapy, and I'm not doing these things. In general, you have a right to say you don't want treatment. Sometimes things can be court-ordered, but generally you have the right to refuse. So here's some things refusal of treatment and then the least restrictive alternative. A least restrictive alternative is making sure that you're in a setting that provides the fewest constraints on the client's freedom while maintaining safety. Okay. Substituted judgment is basically when a person seems unable to make their own sane decisions, and then a family member or a mental health professional or someone like that is legally put in place to make the decisions for them. Okay, let's do some forensic issues here. So when we talk about forensic psychology, there are so many different ways that you can kind of look at this. The insanity defense. Okay, again, insanity is a legal term, not a clinical term. This is an argument presented by a lawyer acting on behalf of a client. The idea is that the client should not be legally held responsible for their criminal act because of a mental disorder. Like, they don't know better because of their mental disorder. Another term is competency to stand trial. So this is not whether or not they should be convicted, but this is, should they even be able to stand trial? Sometimes people are psychotic in the moment, and if they are actively psychotic, they probably should not be standing trial, right? They should probably be put on medication first and then have a trial. Okay, this is a prediction by a mental health expert of the defendant's cognitive and emotional stability during the period of the trial. Understanding the purpose of punishment, right? So if you have someone with severe mental retardation, they do not understand the nature or the purpose of something like a death sentence. So this is a question of whether a mentally ill person or someone with intellectual deficits who is convicted of capital offenses is able to even understand this. Okay? Last thing here. Concluding perspectives. Look, if you're going to work in the mental health field at all, you do need to understand the legal system. You do need to understand forensic issues. You do need to understand ethical issues. You do need to understand all of these things. I used to teach a class at UAB in forensic psychology, actually. And that, I think, was wonderful for myself also to learn and relearn a lot of these phrases and terms and information. I think it continues to help me when I'm thinking about informed consent for my clients, when I'm thinking about record keeping, when I'm thinking about all of this. That's it. That's all I'm going to go over for this chapter. I told you it would be short. You have a full chapter in your book. If you've obviously already read it, you've obviously already done your chapter assignment, so that is wonderful. But I will leave you at this. Thank you for listening to all my lectures. I hope you go and get 100% on your final exam. Make sure you study. Alrighty, bye.